Hello and welcome back to the Fight and Talk 2 channel with myself, Mr. Fighting Talk. If you are new to the channel, please hit like, please hit subscribe and tell all your friends because why not? And we love the subscribers. Back to the show. We have, as always, the fantastic co-hosts, George over in Casual Crush Corner. How are we doing, George?
All good, mate. Thank you. All good.
Good man. Good man. It was nice to see you awake for a main event this week. Obviously, we were live texting each other at 3, 4, and 5 o'clock in the morning with the eventful evening that we had. So it was nice to see you awake and not living up to your casual nature.
No, I'm becoming less casual these days. I need to get back to being a bit more casual about it.
That's it. That's it. And then as always, we have the Eloquent Analyst and the Eloquent Analyst 2.0, Prash and Prath. Thank you very much for both being on the show, Prash. Thank you very much for jumping on for the post-fight of this card as well. Now, I really don't know where to start with this card because it was fireworks. You know, in the pre-fight thing, we kind of spoke more about the main event and the main card, for instance, and it just lived up to everything that we could have even expected and more. It was absolutely unbelievable with the drop leg and then the broken leg and then the leg coming up and then it was just glorious from start to finish. Prath, what was your highlight of the evening that you saw and really your standout moment?
Oh man,
if there can be one, because there's numerous.
There's several that I really enjoyed from the evening. The Chris dying was not one of them, of course. The Rose win. I like absolutely loved both fighters going in, Rose and Jung Wei Lee, and like amazing. I expected it to be crazy, but just the way that Rose took control, in and out motions, the beautiful head kick, like we're going to get into it, but oh my God, that was that. I mean, if that isn't the star winning performance of the night, like I think Kamaru getting his one as well was a big moment. But for me, Rose defeating what was kind of being regarded here, you know, I think once you're able to get those wins over Joanna and stuff, it's you're kind of put in a rarefied air of that kind of weight class, and you know, Rose winning twice over her, Jung winning once over her. Like this was about as elite as a fight as you're going to get, and it felt that way when we were going in. So them, and obviously that, you know, in my pre-fight I was breaking down Randy Brown versus Alex Oliveira. Randy Brown hitting him with a beautiful one-armed rear naked choke, which isn't something you see too often. So yeah, looking forward to getting into these a little bit more.
And there was quite a lot of aggression between those two gentlemen as well after the fight. There was lots of, you know, flicking of the bird and this kind of stuff. But did you see why that was, or why the animosity was there before the fight?
So as far as I could tell, I don't know if there was mad talk between the guys leading into the fight, but if you look at the weigh-in face-off, they both got very much into each other's face. You know, neither man kind of backing down an inch, especially Cowboy Oliveira. He has usually a crazy big hat on. You see he take the hat off, which isn't something you commonly see because he's, you know, that's his persona and things like that. So you know, I wouldn't say, I don't know if it was bad intentions, but just kind of like wanted to go in and prove a point. And I think Randy getting that win really showed, you know, and I think you know, this is one of the things I mentioned in the pre-fight is that they're both coming off of losses. So I think that was just a very emotional Randy Brown, first of all, and just wanting to just kind of get up and say, you know, you can get in my face and be aggressive, but you know, I will still best you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then George, you had Jimmy Crute in the Crush Corner last week, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
it was very unfortunate the way that played out. I thought they looked very, very well matched on the feet. The jab from Smith was absolutely glorious, piecing up Jimmy Crute. The leg kicks from Jimmy Crute. But what did you take away from the fight and the fluke? Because, you know, we can all say that, yeah, we practiced that in training. And we've been running that all the time during camp. But at the end of the day, these kind of things are fluke accidents. You know, this is MMA and anything can happen at any time. But what did you take away from Jimmy Crute's performance and the obvious stoppage there?
There's not really a lot to take away from it, though, is there? That's the kind of disappointing thing about these kind of, like those instances, the kind of 5 minutes in, you don't really get to know too much about Jimmy Crute from last night. You kind of have to kind of go away. It's super frustrating, but you have to kind of go away, come back, and maybe see Jimmy Crute, you know, 3-4 months down the line. You know, like I said, he hit with that jab by Anthony Smith pretty regularly, and that's a thing clearly he needs to work on, because it was too much at times. The leg kicks were good, but like I said, it's a freak accident. Completely deaded his leg and the nervous system in it. He couldn't stand on it, and it was right to pull the fight off. But yeah, I personally haven't learned a lot from Jimmy Crute's performance last night. We'll have to see him back in there, hopefully against another top 10 guy pretty soon once his leg back and healed.
Yeah, I mean, from a fan perspective, it's almost like a groin strike, isn't it? You've got 5 minutes to recover from it. That kind of leg kick where he was going to recover, and he was going to recover fairly quickly after that. So, Prash, what do you think? Do you think that, an injury like that, where they could actually come back from it in the next kind of couple of minutes, should they be given that little bit of extra time to be able to gather their bearings and get their feet underneath them? But, no pun intended, but what do you think about that kind of injury? Obviously, we saw it with Chito Vera and Sean O'Malley as well.
I think that, you have to put the fighter's safety first. And at the end of the day, if there's no guarantee that he's going to recover within that time, then why take the risk? Because, you could see Jimmy Crute was really, fighters are never going to say, well, for the most part, they're never going to say, I give up. They're always going to try the best. And you can see Crute trying to get back in there, trying to be really spirited, showing his heart, and ultimately, having to be waved off on his behalf. And this is where we always say, should a corner step in if they feel like the fighter can't continue? And yes, we've seen this leg giving out many different fights. Remember, is it Henry Cejudo? We saw a Michael Chandler, obviously, in Bellator. And by the time he was walking out the cage, he seemed to be okay. Mm-hmm. But, you just never know with these things. So I think for the fighter's safety and everything like that, it's better to just call it off. I'm sure they could potentially either do it again. Also, they may move on, but they're still going to be roughly the same sort of echelon of the rankings. So I don't see them, Anthony Smith's not about to get a top 5 opponent based on that performance. He's, probably got to rack up another 1 or 2 wins before he goes there. So I don't think it's done major harm to Crute's chances, and I don't think it's really massively benefited Anthony Smith either. So
yeah, no, completely. And that makes sense, because a groin strike is obviously an illegal strike, whereas this is a completely legal strike, and it hits that nerve just on the side of the knee. And we could see it straight away that it just completely took away his leg, and it looked painful. Do you know what I mean? From a viewer perspective, obviously we had the situation afterwards looked even more painful, but just to see him kind of trying to walk and his leg was just not playing ball. Do you know what I mean? His leg was like, nope, I'm not having any of this. We're going over there. You're going over here. You can do what you like. Now, Prath, we obviously spoke about Anthony Smith being a bit of a journeyman on our pre-fight, and this obviously gives him a win in his column now. But, Prash just said he's not going to be able to fight a top 5, but where does he go? Because he's ranked 6, I believe. So where does he go from now? Because is he going to be that kind of gateway person, or can he make another shot for the title?
I mean, again, I've got to agree with my brother here and say that he's got to definitely get a couple of wins here before he really is kind of elevated into that status and that stratosphere. I think he's in the same way that, we were talking about him maybe about 2 years ago, where he was kind of going to Jones for the title fight. He was in a really good position there, still at the back end of his career, or the latter part of his career, if you will, and still was able to rack up the wins and go and fight Jones as well. Unfortunately, lost to Jones. Could have come away with a TKO injury and given Jones another weird loss on his record if he wanted to, but took the man way out, if you will. Who do I see him fighting next? I see him fighting, you got quite a few guys that are ranked underneath him that I think would be great fights. Magomed Ankalaev, Volkan Ozdemir, Nikita Krylov, Johnny Walker. These are all fights that I can see Anthony Smith getting booked in next. Potentially someone like a Johnny Walker, because I know Johnny Walker is someone that they really want to, elevate to the top of the rankings. Showman, and has the look and the attitude and the style. So I can see Johnny Walker kind of, I wouldn't say getting an easy way up the rankings, because I do think that Anthony Smith, despite him having the win-loss record that he has, is a veteran, a smart veteran. He looked as good as I've seen him in his last couple of fights in this fight here with Jimmy Crute. And, I think having someone that's young, young and powerful, really motivated Anthony Smith to realize, like, okay, I've got to train as hard as I can for this. And he looked great. He looked sharp as well. And I think that was one of the things where you were looking at the leg kicks there, and he was throwing beautiful outside leg kicks, inside leg kicks. And I don't know if that contributed to the issue that Jimmy Crute ended up having, but I would definitely say that they weren't pleasant welcoming gifts. So yeah. Johnny Walker, Volkan Ozdemir, maybe that's another great fight for him to have. I'd love to see Magomed Ankalaev fight, a Thiago Santos or an Alexander Rakic, someone of that stature who can really kind of elevate that next crop of guys at light heavyweight who are coming up that look incredible. Magomed Ankalaev, Johnny Walker, Jim Crute, Paul Craig, Jamala Hill, like these are all guys that are getting up there, and with a couple of key wins can really see themselves in the title fight very, very soon.
Definitely. I completely agree, man. I completely agree. And another person that's not going to see themselves in a title fight anytime in the near future is the All-American Chris Weidman. Now, I said before on the pre-fight show that I wasn't a massive fan of Chris
smiling.
Weidman.
Stop smiling.
I wasn't a massive fan of Chris Weidman. And, nobody wants to see someone go out like that. But I've kind of been, playing this around in the back of my head all day. The fact that Anderson Silva kicked him and broke his leg, and then he kicked Uriah Hall and broke his leg. What are the chances of this happening? It's only happened a few times in the UFC, 3 times, I believe. And Chris Weidman was in 2 of them. What are the chances? It seems like back in the day, his legs were made of steel and someone else broke. And now his legs are made of, bamboo and, and Hall is
mostly metal now at this point.
It's crazy. Honestly, it was gruesome to watch, but I'm a massive fan of gore and horror. So I watched it from every angle there was possible because, yeah, fine. I'm a little bit sick. I don't mind. But it was the first fight in the UFC's history that the winner had won without throwing a single strike or shot. And I think that is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now, we obviously know that Chris Weidman's going to have a long, long break from here. But, George, do you see him coming back at any point? He's obviously on the latter part of his career. He's 36. He's going to have to take... This is a good 2.5 years out now. He's never coming back, right? But what do you think? Is he going to move to Bellator or something from this?
Maybe he comes back, but like you said, he's going to be out for at least 2 years. I think this is probably a career ender, to be honest. It was terrible, wasn't it? It was a proper bad break. You just instantly, as soon as it happened, it was like, and obviously all the commentary were like, oh my God. And it was the bit where he tried to step back and, nasty. It was hideous, to be honest. But yeah, this is at least 2 years layoff. And I just think at his age, where he is in the rankings, what is there really left to kind of push for anymore? I suppose, I suppose it'll be down to Chris Weidman. What's his desire to come back and continue to compete? Psychologically, the next 2 years could be quite hard going. All the rehab, all the work to get back even to being in the octagon again. It might not be worth it for him. So if I had to guess, I would have thought it's probably the last time we'll see Chris Weidman inside the cage, I reckon.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it was a clean snap as well. And a few of the angles that I saw, you could see Uriah Hall. He put almost every ounce of his body weight onto his front leg. It was like he cemented his foot into the ground and pushed his knee forward to get that perfect angle to obviously check the kick. But nobody thought it was going to snap. Nobody at all. It was just unbelievable. But perhaps
could you look less happy, please?
Yeah, man, sure.
Perhaps you were talking about changing of the guard before this, right? You were talking about getting rid of these old fighters and, out of the old, in with the new. But, it's such a shame. But both these gentlemen were extremely respectful to each other. And, Hall was extremely respectful afterwards as well. But does Hall's stock go up after this? Obviously, he won without throwing a single strike. But Prash, where do you think he goes from here? Because I doubt his rankings are going to change because it was a freak accident.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here for Uriah Hall. First of all, I don't think his stock goes up at all. I don't think it really changes. I mean, he'd looked good in the lead up to this fight. Strung a couple of wins together. against the aging Silva. Then, now you put the old dog out in Weidman. Where do you go from here? Knowing, I mean, we all, we talk about it in the pre-fight about how Uriah Hall's biggest Achilles heel was his mindset. And I think that, you could see how devastated and affected he was by what happened to Weidman. And I just really wonder, will this, exacerbate his lack of killer instinct now? Because, mate, he looked really freaked out by what was going on. I mean, he looked a few times, he was really apologetic, and of course you're going to be in that situation. But I remember, when he did the kick against Adam Sella in the Ultimate Fighter and knocked him out, the famous million played highlight of Uriah Hall's that touted him as the next Anderson Silva, and after that it didn't seem like he could really find that same sort of touch again. And I just really wonder, there are killers in this division, absolute killers in the middleweight division. And I do wonder whether going through an experience like that, how he'll handle that and how he'll be affected by it going forward, because it's tough at the top up there in the middleweight division and there's no easy matchups. Even, Gastelum getting beaten by Whitaker the other day. Gastelum didn't go down, without fighting. He really showed he had a lot of heart and courage, and I can imagine him just steamrolling Uriah Hall. So yeah. I wonder, of those people who are coming off losses in middleweight division, most of them match up really well against Hall and would probably beat him. So I don't know. I felt like this was a relatively favourable match for him because, Weidman's a veteran, even though they're the same age. It feels like Weidman's been around a bit longer. I think probably at a more high level of competition at least anyway. So yeah, I mean, I know that doesn't really answer the question, but I just don't think there's much, like, we said it before, this is kind of a no gimme fight. Both of them are sort of on the latter part of their career. It feels like, it doesn't feel like they've got title aspirations in their horizon. So where do they go from here? Where's the gain to be made? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And just with regards to, how he looked and as he was looking over and stuff, I'm a big fan of gore. I've seen a lot of gore in person and a lot of gore on TV, etc., and been in some very, very terrible situations. And I think when the cameras are on you, if he was to just be looking over and going, that looks bad, it would make people think, oh, wow, like he doesn't care. Look at him. He's ruthless, but he wants to come across like he's a professional. And he did that yesterday in his post-fight speech as well. He was extremely professional and said, I'm sorry and that kind of stuff. But perhaps, as you say, like if it may have been, 5 or 6 years ago, he might have been like, well, it was his fault. He tried to kick me. It's not my problem. But
no, I think actually Uriah Hall's always come across as quite a kind and decent person. Whenever I've seen any interviews with him, he doesn't seem like a very arrogant, a conceited person or any of that sense. I think he's genuine. I think he did genuinely care. I don't think that was an act in any sense. And I do really genuinely question how his mindset is going to be after this. Like you said, I agree with you. What can you do but look and be like, oh my God, that's terrible. But at the same time, like there are certain, fighters that you have seen that they've had that killer instinct already in their previous many fights. Like Uriah Hall, Pradeep could probably answer before us. Like when does he had a really devastating finish like the one from the Ultimate Fighter? I can't really think of one that comes to mind really. So he hasn't had the killer instinct for a while, and I think it's going to be gone going forward for him.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Prath, obviously Joe Rogan didn't get to interview Chris Weidman, but he interviewed every other person that was on the losing end of this fight card. But obviously the UFC have told Joe Rogan to go and interview the losing party as well. But why do you think that is? Because obviously we had the thing a few years ago when DC was crying after he lost his belt and stuff like that, and it was very, very unfortunate. But Joe Rogan went and interviewed him anyway. Do you think that's him wanting to interview that person and get their immediate reaction to the devastation that's just unfolded in front of them? Or do you think that's the UFC pushing to interview both parties?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a production-based decision. I would say more so than a Joe Rogan decision. You can see, Rogan goes on his podcast after he interviewed DC and, he's interviewed a few of the guys that have been knocked out. He's like, oh man, I really don't want to go in and have that conversation with someone who's just had their bell rung. A perfect example in this particular event of seeing that same kind of thing was when he interviewed Wei Li after she'd just been knocked out by Rose, and you could tell she was very emotional. Had thought that this fight had been stopped early, maybe hadn't seen any kind of replays of the shot that she got hit with. I think that's, you know, one of the common things you hear about when someone's been knocked out and they get back up, and it's like, well, what shot hit me? And I think you spend too much time thinking about that than what you're actually, you know, then you've got a camera thrust in your face. You've got Joe Rogan right next to you, who's excited as hell. You're excited to meet Joe Rogan, even though you probably just lost. Like, there's the whole dynamic of the situation is wild for someone who's also just been knocked out and had their bell rung like that. So I don't agree with it. I think that, you know, let them have their time to make their own statement. I think that's where you kind of comment. Well, commonly for myself, like, I think I respect it a little. If, you know, if he didn't go and interview Zhang Wei Li, and then I read Zhang Wei Li's Instagram post, I think it was Instagram or Twitter post, where she, you know, she said, like, I've got respect for Rose, and like, I learned from this, and like, you know, like the fabric of the UFC is something that I understand a little bit more now, and like, I'm going to come back and I want the rematch. Like, if I read that, I would have been like, sweet. But kind of seeing the way that she behaved after the fight, I think that was one of those things where maybe could have been handled differently. But I get also wanting to understand what's going through the head of the person that just lost. You know, when it's a decision loss, then it's easier to kind of go, okay, well, you know, I didn't do this, or I should have done this, or I should have done that. Whereas when you've been knocked out, that I could have seen the shot coming differently. It's most of the time you find out that they didn't even see the shot, and so that for me is the thing that really kind of pulls me aside and doesn't make me really enjoy watching those post-fight knockouts, with the person being interviewed is still trying to gather their thoughts, still trying to gather their surroundings, their you know, the things that are going on right now. They're still probably asking a lot of questions like, what's going on and what shot hit me, and things like that. So definitely Chris was not getting an interview if that's the kind of route you were going down there. Oh man, it's just it's one of the most mind-blowing things. I've seen it happen. Corey Hill, you've seen Anderson Silva, you've seen it now happen to Chris. So my question to you guys is, does this happen to Uriah Hall now? Is Uriah Hall now carrying the curse, and the next well, hopefully not the next person he fights, but someone down the line is going to break his leg? Is that Kevin Holland? Is that a matchup that I'm just throwing out, thinking that Uriah Hall probably needs a win where he wants to kind of solidify himself a little bit more as a contender in this division? And I think someone like Kevin Holland might be able to kind of bring out the style points in someone like Uriah Hall, but hopefully doesn't break his leg and continue the curse. But I guess this is something we'll come back to if Uriah Hall ever breaks his leg.
Yeah, unbelievable. It's, you know,
yeah,
1,000,000,000 to 1. Do you know what I mean? It really, really is. The odds on him snapping his leg, if that you were to go to bookies and say, right, look, I'm putting £1 on him snapping his leg, it just would never happen. It was just
talk about perfect technique, right?
Exactly.
Like the check of the leg was perfect. The way that Chris did it to Anderson, perfect. And it's just that, like, that precise point of contact that shattered that bone that caused that issue to happen, man. It was, man. Oh.
And I just wonder what happens from here. Do obviously this happened during his UFC fight. So do the UFC look after him from now on and, you know, address his rehabilitation and pay for his rehabilitation? I'm not sure how that works, or if there's any sort of contingency should that happen. Anyone got any ideas? Prash is shaking your head there.
David said, go pay your own bills, mate. Come on.
Go pay your own bill. I believe that if it happens, in the fight, they give them the doctor. I don't know if they pay for all of the stuff, but I know that they at least like will get a doctor their own doctor to check them out. I know that they have, I forget the name of the guy. I think it's like Dr. Davidson or something like that, who is the UFC's personal physician. But then I guess that they would have specialists in these certain areas. Like when Robbie Lawler cut his lip up against Rory McDonald, he got that surgically done within a couple of weeks because Dana White had a guy that was able to do it like perfectly. So I think that they have people that are like specialists, but I don't know if they pay that full bill or pay half the bill. I think if you look at someone like
I think they cover the short-term bills. So like, you know, the initial hospital admittance or whatever, but long-term rehab and stuff, mate, it's down to you. You carry on this. There's no area manual money going towards any of them fighters. Dana's not giving them a cut of any check for that. Like, it's like, good luck, my friend.
Yeah.
So
Ally Aquino has spoken on this like extensively, talking about how when he had knee issues I think before the Khabib fight, like a couple of years before the Khabib fight, he had like serious knee problems, and he was always like, you know, going on Aerial Show, going on MMA Junkie or Submission Radio, and being like, you know, I'm really disgusted at how the UFC have treated me and like not paid for anything, and I've had to do everything myself, and that harbors a lot of resentment and anger, you know, naturally.
Which is why we haven't seen him for such a long time. That would be.
I was about to say.
He's probably still annoyed.
Is that?
Yeah.
And I think that they obviously, like, the fighters don't talk to Dana directly, right? They talk to Sean Shelby, they talk to Mick Maynard. So I don't know if I wouldn't say like Ally Quinter is pissed at Dana White. I'm sure he's more, you know, his hate is more harbored towards like Sean Shelby or something like that.
And just the organization in general, I think, because there's obviously, it's not, everyone looks at Dana White because he's the face of the UFC, whereas there's obviously a massive group of people around him that make decisions and tell him to make decisions. You know, even in the post-fight press conference, well, obviously for us, it was this morning, he was kind of looking to the side and people were telling him what to say. And he was a bit blubbery during that, kind of stumbling his words. I don't know if he'd had a few beers or whatever, but he was a bit like, you know, a bit stuttery and a bit not his usual confident self. Did you watch that, Prash? The post-fight?
Yeah, I did watch it. There was something strange in the air. I don't know what was going on there on the post-fight conference, because first of all, I remember there was things distracting him. Like he kept there. Do you remember there was a couple of times during it where he was like, "What was that? What's this? What's that?" He just didn't seem. He didn't seem fully engaged like he usually is. Who knows why? Maybe it's a couple of tequilas, you know, first night since they've gone back or whatever. But I think we can forgive him because usually his press conferences are always entertaining and he's always got a lot of smack to talk. So.
Maybe he met up with Oscar De La Hoya, who was still on a come down from the Triller night, and then they had a little party together.
Best friends. They absolutely love each other. I know that for a fact. Yeah,
they go out all the time. They drink Masvidal's tequila. But Prath, you segued into the Zhang Weili versus Rose Namajunas fight perfectly, and it was. None of us were expecting this. We were all expecting a real brawl from these two ladies who are well-rounded, both of them very, very well-rounded fighters. Zhang Weili, fantastic fighter. Prath was talking about the Embedded series before, and you know, her mindset and her training is just unbelievable, and she is so muscular. Not as muscular as the lady that was on the early prelims. I don't know if you saw her. She was jacked. She was
the Brazilian lady, yeah.
I cannot remember her name, but she had
Ariane Carnelozzi.
She had traps for shoulders and shoulders for traps that were built on top of like just brick. I don't know what happened, but anyway, Zhang Weili is not built like that. She looked really good yesterday, and so did Rose Namajunas. And it was unfortunate to see it finish the way it did. I know all of the fans and us included, we wanted to see a little bit more from these two ladies, but it ended the way it did. George, where do you see Rose going from this? Because there's a couple of killers in this division, but not as many as you'd like. You know, as we know, the women's divisions are still quite shallow. Do we see Joanna Jędrzejczyk kind of coming back for the belt here, or do we see a rematch with Zhang Weili? Or, you know, who's next for the belt and who's next for Rose Namajunas after this victory?
Well, I suppose Joanna will throw her name into the hat like she always does. That'll probably has already happened already. She's probably already said that she wants to fight Rose next, probably. Yeah. Oh, she has she? Yeah, classic.
She said prior to the fight, I want the winner. Whoever the winner is, I'm coming back for the belt. So,
right. I said to you before we started that they might somehow justify running this back somehow, maybe. Don't know if that will happen. I actually was thinking, obviously, because I've thought that maybe Weili would get it done, that perhaps they would start to look at that Carla Esparza and Yan Xiaonan fight coming up in a month's time, and maybe the winner of that will fight for the belt. Obviously, there was that potential to have that Chinese like super fight between the two of them. So I guess maybe that's where Rose heads next, you know, to a Carla Esparza, a Yan Xiaonan. You know, Yan Xiaonan's looked very good since she's been in the UFC. I think she's undefeated in the UFC. So perhaps that's the next person to come through for her. I mean, there are options. It would feel a bit deflating if they go, cool, so Rose won the belt and now we're going to book her against Joanna. It's like, oh, cool. Like, I feel like we need to see something else. I feel like we need to see something else now. We need to see something a bit different. So yeah, I personally hope that they don't go that route and maybe they look towards a Zhao, Nana, and Esparza as the next kind of. That seems to make more sense than anything, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And fingers crossed we see a lot more of these kind of up and coming women in these divisions making a bit more noise and making their way gradually towards the title as well. On the pre-fight show and obviously the week prior to the fights, we saw a lot of things in the news and in social media about Rose Namajunas and talking about communism and China and different bits and pieces. But she obviously cleared up the air afterwards. And after the fight, she went over to Weili Zhang and said, she tried to shake her hand. Obviously, Zhang Weili was very upset as well. But Prash, Rose kind of cleared everything up after. But do you think it was just clearing things up, even though she'd already made a mess in the first place? Or, do you think she could have handled it a bit differently?
I think, first of all, Rose is clearly not PR trained or manufactured. I think, it's very small camp around her, a small bunch of people, and they sort of try and encourage her to be who she is, speak your mind, be that confident person. You could see it, when she was walking into the ring, and then when Bruce Buffer was announcing her name, she was saying, I'm the best. And you just saw this confidence we haven't seen from her that we knew that was missing from her arsenal. And it seemed like all the kind of, everything had come together. It was a different Rose that is finally embracing, as she's saying on the lead up, I'm embracing that I'm the best. And I think that when doing that, she has decided that, look, I'm going to say what's on my mind. And I think she recognized that, in that time, in that moment, she needed to be a better person than maybe she'd shown in the lead up, and probably felt the backlash and wasn't really used to that, because I think more or less all of her run, she's been completely widely adored. And, she at the weigh-in got probably the biggest roar from the crowd of any of the fighters. So I think knowing that, and then knowing the backlash, it was like, well, this is the time, especially if you think about her last championship winning post-fight speech, where it was really sweet and it was about, the world should be a better place or something along those lines, I'm paraphrasing. So this time it had to be a speech that sort of topped or equaled that. And I felt like it was slightly a sort of nod to a bit of clever PR to just say, hey, like, I need to be a little bit more responsible. If I'm going to be widely adored and I'm going to make this work as a champion, I need to recognize that I can't just open my mouth and just run wild with it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. She obviously said these things that I've spoken about are personal to me. And, exactly. I don't have any sort of animosity towards any group of people. And yeah, exactly like you say, once she had the belt around her waist, I reckon she kind of thought, wow, I need to be, that person that little girls are going to look up to and people are going to look up to and aspire to be like, not just as a fighter, but as a person as a whole. Now, obviously, yesterday we had the fans back, and we heard a lot of booing for certain fighters. And one of the fighters that got booed yesterday was Zhang Weili. And I was not a massive fan of that. And I was, a little bit disappointed that we'd seen that. But Prath, why do you think she got booed? Purely because she's Chinese and the Americans are just overly racist, or because of the things that maybe Rose Namajunas had said in the build-up?
I mean, you answered your own question there, Bob, dude. Basically, I'm not going to say that America is a racist country, but I mean, to stick a Chinese lady in there in the first crowd back, obviously very animated, very emotional. Maybe, and Florida of all places, like Florida is kind of known to be, one of the more craziest states in the US and stuff. Obviously they just wanted to put the best fights out in front of the crowd that they had available. And obviously this was for me, before this fight was the most anticipated fight for me, Rose versus Weili. I think the crowd did a really good job of elevating a lot of the fighters on the fight night. You could see the energy, you could see the adrenaline, especially those early fight past prelims, right? When you're watching them regularly, you're only seeing maybe about a handful of people in the audience, 10, 15, maybe, let's say like at the most you'll see 100 people out of maybe like a 15,000 cap venue, right? So that's what you're used to regularly hearing. Now, what you found in that one was that the place was full before like even the first fight had come out, so the energy must have been absolutely electric for those first couple of guys, and I'm sure they felt it when they were in there. But for them to be booing any of these fighters, obviously the way that I feel about booing and wooing and the Mexican wave in the crowd is just all like, ridiculous. I've been to a few events, like I've been to, Anderson Silva versus Michael Bisping at the O2 Arena, and Bisping, sorry, not Bisping, Silva was getting booed, and it's like, this is Anderson Silva, the greatest, probably one of the greatest mixed martial arts performers in the world, coming to the UK to fight one of our own guys. And I get like crowd hostility and like, cheering for Bisping, but that, I thought that whole juxtaposition was a bit stupid. It didn't also help that I was in a row full of Brazilian people, so I couldn't really do any booing per se. Not that I wanted to, because Anderson's a legend. But yeah, that entire side of the fans being back is one that I have not missed in any way. And I was trying to sit there, and so over the weekend I was actually with some friends. I kind of stayed, like I went kind of like to the middle of nowhere and had some time in some nature and stuff, staying with some friends who are, I would say, like at most like casual fans of MMA. We wanted to stay up and watch the fights, and that was one of the first things that they were kind of mentioning. They were like, wow, the crowd is electric at the start, and when Weili was walking out and when Weili was in the cage getting announced, like they were like, wow, this sucks so much. Like this, this person's coming out. And again, they're casual fans, right? They don't know, the backstory of Rose. They don't know the backstory of Weili to the extent that, us four and probably the viewers, or 20 viewers of the show. No, I'm joking. Hopefully hundreds of viewers of our show will agree that, like, that will know that backstory. They didn't know that, but were still disappointed at the fact that they were getting booed. So I think it really disproportionately affects people. And I think maybe, I wouldn't want to say that, she didn't look shaken by it. She didn't look like she was rattled by the fact that she was getting booed kind of out of the building, as much as I hate to say that. But I think, if Weili went in there and starched Thug Rose, like that crowd would have been electric. That crowd would have been jumping. They would have been, they would have gone completely different. But I think this is what you're going to see with American crowds, right? American crowd. Oh, the other thing as well, yeah, the thing that also we picked up on was that Tristan Connolly was fighting. Tristan Connolly was fighting Patrick Sabatini, right? Patrick Sabatini is an American fighter. Tristan Connolly is a Canadian fighter, and they were chanting USA. I'm like, that just seems so bizarre. Like, there's literally one border separating these two gentlemen, and they're still going to boo him. And it's, as the Europeans, we kind of just lump everything together. So we're like, oh yeah, you're the US. When we meet a Canadian person, we're like, oh, you have an American accent. They're like, we have a Canadian accent, and they get offended, right? And so for Americans to be booing Canadians is stupid. Chinese people is stupid. Usman versus Colby Covington, they're booing and chanting USA against Kamaru Usman, even though Kamaru Usman's like one of like a super credentialed American wrestler. Like, they're just stupid people. They're just stupid people. I'm just going to say it here. As a European person, we look at the American crowds and we think, God, what a bunch of idiots. Because when they come here, we might give them a bit of crap on the walkout. We might give them a bit of crap on the announcement. But as soon as the fight's over, like, we're cheering the hell out of both people. And I don't know if that's a European thing or if that's a British thing, but I know that that's how we conduct ourselves here. And to see how the Americans conduct themselves sometimes, it's a little embarrassing, because as well, we want this sport to be widely recognized. Like, it's on ESPN now. Someone in China watching this fight will be like, why is our champion being booed out the building? Like, they won't have the same context as we would, because Chinese people are mostly respectful and are humble kind of people. So across the world, that's been translated in different ways, and it's just mind-blowing to me. I think the juxtaposition of it is very interesting. So great question.
I'm with you, but the only thing I will disagree with is that there was a certain chant that we heard yesterday that I was all for and I was all on board with, and that was
F Jake Paul, yeah, hell yeah,
Jake Paul. That came out numerous times throughout the evening, and it is glorious to see the MMA community band together, no matter what race, color, gender, whatever it may be, ganging up on the absolute troll that is Jake Paul.
Is this kid out of his goddamn mind going up to Daniel Cormier, a two-time Olympic champion, two-weight champion, and giving him crap? Like, is he out of his bloody mind?
DC went up to him.
DC went up to him, started
DC saw him and went up
as
to
a
him
response,
like,
right?
yo.
As a response.
But he was laughing on the comms as well. You could hear him, and he was like, "What are they chanting? What are they chanting? I can't hear them. I can't." He was really playing the game, and John Anik probably had someone in his ear going, No. They're saying F Jake Paul. We can't say that. We can't say that on air. You know, it was fantastic to see everyone kind of gang up on him, and he shouldn't have been given the time of day to be there. To be honest with you, after what happened last week and the absolute joke that was his little vlog that he did, it's just disappointing. It's disappointing to see him even being in an event, because what's he there for? You know, he's just there to cause trouble.
He went there to get attention, and
Exactly.
he soaked up the attention, and he got given the attention, and it was a complete masterstroke, to be honest with you. In fact, he's taught the whole MMA community a valuable lesson about how to really market yourself. And, you know, today, I don't know if you guys saw before you jumped on the chat, but he went on Twitter and attacked Dana White, basically saying, look, I went to your event, nothing happened. Look what we did to your MMA fighter. And then he went, and why don't you pay your fighters enough? I just earn more than most of your headline fighters have ever earned. Why don't you pay your fighters properly? And everyone is actually cheering him on Twitter, of all people, Jay Paul. Even I was like, yeah, no, I don't like the guy, but it's a good point. So it's really heating up. He knows what he's doing. It's a shame he was given the attention, but, you know, they should have known what was going to happen. And I just, you know, he's like Colby Covington. He's just another troll. Do you know what I mean? Like, every time they cut to Colby Covington yesterday, I just wanted to cringe. Just like, I don't want to hear from this guy, man. You know, yeah. Oh, it's too much. You know, he went on, like, he did interviews with every single MMA media just before the fight. I went on YouTube and it was 4 suggested videos, and it was Colby in 4 different outfits talking to 4 different people. One's a schmo, one's a MMA junkie, another, and he's just going on about this Jorge, his wife, and this and that. You just think, why are you giving this guy airtime too? You know, so I mean, we ourselves as, you know, MMA community, we have those trolls already. We encourage them, we allow them. So, you know, unfortunately, Jake Paul's no different.
Yeah, but if he's talking about fighter pay, then fair play. If he can turn his kind of villain persona within the MMA community into something that can be very positive, then it will not only get the MMA community behind him thinking, wow, you know, he's doing some cool stuff, but, you know,
Georgie, okay?
Yeah, George looks like he's about to jump through the screen.
He's not though, is he? He's not. Dana White ain't gonna listen, is he? He ain't gonna. He's just some pillock who's turned up last night. You know, let's be frank about it.
They should not have let him in. They should have mugged him off completely.
But Jake Paul has enough money to be able to put on his own MMA event and pay everyone a substantial amount from top to bottom on a card. And that will get Dana White scared, because he could essentially steal half the roster, start his own organization. Theoretically, just stay with me. He could start his own organization, pay everyone better. And then where is everyone going to go? They're going to stay in the UFC. They're going to go where they're making 50 and 50 on the prelims. It'd be a no-brainer, because Jake Paul has got that kind of money and he draws that kind of attention. Just as a thought.
Who knew we were talking about Jake Paul as the next big MMA promoter, right? Oh, gosh.
You just don't know.
Dana White, Scott Coker, Jake Paul.
Yeah, it sounds good.
I like it. Don't forget Chatry.
Chatry, yeah. Chatry sits around long. Yeah.
There you go. But moving on to the next fight of the evening, we obviously had the Bullet, who continued to soar through the air and destroy everything in her path like a hollow point, leaving a gaping wound behind her. In this case, very much a gaping wound on the top of Jessica Andrade's head. Now, as soon as we saw her sink that crucifix, we knew it was over. She loves that position, and her elbows she looked like a sewing machine. She was they were just firing down, and she knew the fight was going to be stopped, but her wrestling was absolutely fantastic. At one point, she tried an outside trip on the right. She didn't get it. She moved swiftly to the left. She put her straight down. Glorious performance from the Bullet. George, what do we do with Valentina now? Because she is, you know, up there with Amanda Nunes with regards to the greatest female of all time. But do we have to see a number 3 for them two ladies to really solidify one of them as the female GOAT?
Yeah, if we want to see a competitive fight for Valentina and for Amanda, then probably, that's probably the way to go, because everyone else, it's just easy, isn't it? I mean, last night was the only normal thing that happened, wasn't it? It was just simple, easy, flawless work from Valentina, like it always is. You know, she never looks phased. She never looks in any kind of trouble. And it's like you said, it's almost just too easy. So where is the challenge? You know, she says that she'll fight anybody, you know, so, which is good. That's what you want to hear from a champion. But the only challenge I see is Nunes. I do think there is that people will argue that trilogies can only happen if they're one apiece. That second fight was so close. You know, you'll find thousands of fans that will say that Valentina won that you can justify the third fight. And so it's likely at some point that will happen. Obviously, Nunes has got Pena coming up soon, and Valentina will probably have to fight Lauren Murphy or Jojo Calderwood in that kind of title eliminator that's not official title eliminator. But I mean, that will be a bloodbath, and that'll be easy work again. And at some point, they'll come round and they'll meet each other. But we do need to see it, because I think there are questions now. I think there'll be definite reasons for Valentina to beat Nunes, and I think that's the interesting kind of thing for the trilogy fight, is that when that if that fight is booked, that there is that genuine question: will Nunes lose? While before it's just been like, well, that's boring because Nunes will win, and that's boring because Shevchenko will win. But last night I said it to you, Colin, when we were talking, it was just flawless work. It was picture perfect every second for however long it lasted. And she is in the conversation to be the women's MMA GOAT. You know, her record is unbelievable. I think it's 21-3, which is insane. And those two of those 3 losses obviously came to Nunes. The way she handles herself inside and outside of the octagon as well is a credit to the sport. And she just lives to fight. You know, that's the thing. I think that's the main thing about her. She just lives to get back into the octagon and compete. I think she's one of the best people that the UFC have. And she should be nurtured and given the fights that she deserves to have. And I think Nunes is the fight. It's ginormous, that third fight. It is. So no doubt at some point it will come along for sure.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, I kind of saw that reiterated on the timeline yesterday of Twitter. And it was just, we really need to see Nunes fight now. But, does Shevchenko move up to 135? Does Nunes come down to 125? Who makes that jump to be in the cold, be in the hot water where they don't want to be?
I think Valentina said it herself. I think someone asked her last night in an interview, said, what if about the third fight? I think she said there's no way Nunes will come down, so I'll have to go back up.
Or even a catch weight at 130, even a catch weight at 130, she goes up 5, she comes down 5, and then they put both belts on the line. Why not?
I feel like
things have happened.
I feel like the thing is, I feel like Nunes knows that if she was to go down, that she's in a much more dangerous world. So I think for she knows that if she is steadfast on staying at 135, that she's got a better chance. I think 125 is Valentina's world, and Nunes hasn't, I think it's a more dangerous choice for Amanda Nunes if she chooses to go down. I think it's way more likely we see that happen at 135.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And, so many times we see these fantastic champions retiring too late almost. And obviously we saw with Khabib, he got to 29-0, and then he was like, you know what, I'm going to retire. I don't need to do anything else. Do you think, Prash, what do you think? Do you think that Valentina is going to get to a point, maybe 2 or 3 more wins? She's going to go, you know what, I've beaten everyone twice. There's nothing left for me here. I'm going to retire with a perfect, near perfect record and just sail off into the sunset and continue to, train back in Tiger Muay Thai or wherever she's training.
Well, Dana said in the post-fight press conference that he believes Valentina and Amanda should have their own legacy separate from their weight classes. They should stay within their weight classes, fight everyone that they've got to fight, and their sons and their daughters and everyone else, and, just keep going. So he's already sort of more or less said, hey, look, first of all, I'm not interested in that fight. If both women come up to me and say they want it, then fair enough, we'll make it. I don't personally see Nunes really going for it. I kind of feel like Nunes feels like that's a challenge she's accomplished. Like, she let de Randamie get a second crack in it, and you kind of feel like she just sort of closed the chapter on that. And I feel like we've seen from Nunes that now she's got to that point where, hey, she's cashing big checks for easy wins. What's the need to really, go for anything until Clarissa Shields sort of gets herself into gear, or Kayla Harrison? And as for Valentina, I feel like, like we were saying the other day about new contenders sort of starting to emerge, whether it's from China and Brazil and the rest. I feel like in the next 18 months, we will see some new names emerge. And in the meantime, Valentina will just stay active and just keep clearing out any challenger that's in front of her. Because I'm sure there'll be lots of girls volunteering for the meeting, because they'll get a good paycheck out of it, and she'll get a good paycheck out of it. So I think, for the moment, at least, I'd say for at least the next 18 months to 2 years, we will just see her continue on, pick up more wins, probably add another 3 or 4 to her win record. I think Nunes will do the same. And then maybe at some point there'll be enough money on the table where Dana's like, well, look, we need a mega fight because, you know, we're losing money in this region or that region, and let's try and do it. But other than that, I just don't see that. You know, you could see from Dana's kind of body language yesterday, he just didn't seem to really care about it when he was asked about it. Whereas before, he's usually foaming at the mouth for things like that. But this time he's like, nah, we've seen it. I'm good with it. So I think, you know, some normality as well. You know, we've been seeing so much of this, people jumping out their weight classes and 2 belts here, 1 belt here, and things getting held up. And we have had a really, really long time of that. And now it feels like we're getting to a point where champions are defending their belts in their divisions consistently, which we asked for so many years. So let's have that for a little while. Let's have some nice normality, some, you know, #1 contenders fighting champions, shock horror, amazing things that we're doing. So
yeah, it would be nice to see. Prath, what's your two? George, sorry.
Last night, so I just want to say about Valentina was that it was a complete mugging off process by her on Andrade. All week we said, well, Andrade's probably best way to win is probably to wrestle with her. And she basically said, screw you all, I'll wrestle with her for the whole time. I'll show you that it's a complete joke. And she alluded it to in her interview, didn't she? Saying, you know, everyone's been saying that, you know, I've got a weakness. Well, look, I've got no weaknesses. You know, you can't find a hole in my game, so stop trying to find one. It was a complete. I mean, she made Andrade look so amateur. It was unbelievable, to be honest.
And she actually said in her post-fight press conference, she said, "I let my body choose." You know, I think she's a robot sent from the future to destroy all females in this division, because she literally said, "I let my body decide how I'm going to beat them." She said, I didn't really go in there with a plan to wrestle her, but that's how it worked. And to sink that crucifix was absolutely glorious. But Prath, what's your 2 cents on the fight? Tell me.
God, how do I begin? She's just so damn good. She's just so damn good everywhere. Just for the record as well, I think it was George and Connor that was saying that her best opportunity is in the BJJ here.
I've got to give her something, you know.
You got to give her something, but I do you know what? Because I know how good she is on the ground. She beat Juliana Pena, who I think I've got a lot of respect for in a jiu-jitsu setting, if you will. And she was able to get an armbar off on her, and so I knew from then that she had great ground acumen, if that's a word that we're going to throw in there, but I feel like that's apropos. The other thing that I really wanted to kind of focus on was just like how, you know, Valentina kind of put it out there and said like she likes to beat the people in the way that she knows that they will try to beat her. And Nunes kind of does the same thing, which is really weird. Like head kicked Holly Holm. You know, these are the kind of things that you see out of champions that I wouldn't say are bored with their competition, but just know that they are several levels above, man. And she knows it. I think maybe before the Jennifer Maia fight, I didn't get the impression from her that she just kind of had a rarefied air to her from her perspective, like from her question, you know, the way that she would answer the questions. Oh, you know, I respect these people a lot, but she was never like, I'm going to go out there and just absolutely demolish this chick. And I know I will. Like, she felt confident, but never really kind of put it out in that circumstance. And this time around, you know, I'm going to beat her this way, or I'm going to do what my body tells me. And like, but I feel like she's like kind of transcended in her own mind. Like she's leveled up. She's progressed to level 2 now. She's progressed to level 10 in most of our other people's eyes. Maybe to her, she only seems like she may have done an incremental step up, but like, wow, I'm frothing at the mouth of considering her against Nunes, because if you think about that fight as well, like the 2 fights that Nunes beat Valentina over, the second one being a very lackluster decision for Nunes, and the first fight, you know, 2 rounds to Nunes, the 3rd round going to Valentina, and if that was a 5-round fight, Valentina naturally would have taken over there. So like, 2 very, very close fights that I think, you know, have a little bit of a question mark on them. And so for me, I would assume that Nunes, you know, maybe gets through a fight or 2 more and then kind of presents herself and goes, you know what, like, this is a fight that a lot of people have been asking me about over the years. Let me just get this one done. Kind of the same way that she dealt with Cyborg and Home Rousey, yeah, all of these guys, she was able to kind of just dust them off and just that be part of the kind of war path of Nunes, if you will. And now she's kind of like lapping everyone. And now here on the second lap around, she's finally kind of running and catching up to Valentina Shevchenko, who's looking back going, I think I've got a good chance against you. And so I think with the confidence that she's taken from these fights, I think for me, I felt like she would have done really good in a rematch after the Jessica I fight, right? Jessica I head kicking someone, having that confidence, the overflow of confidence from that fight must have just been absolutely amazing for her. And I think that might have been a great time to plug those two together. But wow, incredible. Can we, next time we meet, next time Valentina has a fight, we got to meet up because I've got the greatest drinking game. And I think you guys probably know what the drinking game is, but if we can calculate the amount of times that Joe Rogan calls her an assassin, I think before they've even read her name out, Bruce Buffer's read her name out, we're all absolutely smashed. Because I mean, like I agree, she kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you guys have played Tekken, but there's a character called Nina in Tekken. She just kind of reminds me of her a lot. And so I do agree that she's an assassin, but she doesn't need to be called it every other third word, Joe Rogan. So yeah, next time we're playing a hell of a drinking game, but God bless whoever's fighting her next, because I think, coming off of that amazing finish win where she absolutely unequivocally dominated Jessica Andrade, like whoever goes in next is going to know that they're going to be a punching bag of some sorts. So is it for the paycheck? Do you go in for the fact that you're now a type, let's say the Scottish girl, her name
Calderwood.
is Calderwood. Yes, Joanne Calderwood. She goes in. Is it for the fact that now she's Joanne Calderwood? Title contender more so than anything else. Is that's the rub you really get, because she's not going to beat Valentina. Nobody is going to beat Valentina. She is just that damn good, that damn technical, and just so well-rounded. Like probably the most well-rounded mixed martial artist I think we've ever seen, next to DJ, and that's saying something because DJ is one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, and she would make a fantastic Bond villain. I think
she would.
If she was to segue over into movies and stuff like that, have a few elocution lessons, she could, Arnold Schwarzenegger that stuff right up and be all over it, because she's got the physique for it. She's got the kind of that. Her face just seems like she literally will kill you with her eyelashes. Like she's
cold-blooded. She is.
She'll find a way to kill you, full blown.
And I love how she says that.
Yeah.
That.
But if you listen to her early, you really see that she's tried. Her English is so much better than it used to be, and that is obviously because she knows she needs to market herself better and be able to not have to have a translator with her. So her early stuff, when she was, very, very ropey, to, she did a whole press conference on her own yesterday, and it was glorious.
I mean, let's be fair to her. English is like the fifth language that she's had to pick up. She already knew Spanish fluently. I don't know what to speak in Kyrgyzstan. Probably speaks Russian as well. Mm-hmm. So, I think we can give her a little rope on her not being fully polished in the English side.
Completely.
I think the thing about the Shevchenko sisters, if you will, that really always really piques my interest is their training style. They've got their coach is kind of constantly traveling with them, constantly kind of like they're going from different place to place and maybe rocking up to a training center, but having their same coach basically run their practice and maybe the practice of all the other people that are coming in. And it's a really interesting, it's kind of almost like a boxing training camp in the sense that everything's centered around her. But it's strange. The other weird part of that is that if you look at Valentina and Antonina, vastly different kind of career paths that they've taken so far in the UFC. So I don't know if I would necessarily say that, having, so the gentleman's name is Pavel Fedotov. I don't know if, having a trainer like that constantly with you all the time is the answer. But I think that's definitely one of the things that she takes confidence in, knowing that she is fully like regimented and prepared. And if you look at the embedded episodes, she's been on, an absolute bag of the embedded episodes throughout the years, right? And it's been that same kind of thing where she's in the training center, she's with this kind of old, kind of grizzled Russian man who just looks like he just is like about as no nonsense as you're going to get. and everything looks regimented down to the detail. So that's another thing that I think you don't really see in a lot of, teams. You don't see, you got training centers, you got a Ruka training center and Jackson Wink training center, but you never really see that one-on-one like you kind of do with those girls there. So interesting juxtaposition. I don't know if it truly helps or not, but it clearly is something that has worked very well for her.
You see it quite a lot in gymnastics and stuff, don't you? Especially in like Olympic gymnastics, and they have one coach, and the whole gymnastics team will have that one coach who will see them from being 14 to being 24 and going through absolutely every process. And it's a very, like you say, it's very regimented as well. Very, very regimented. And it works for her, if we see a lot of fighters moving from camp to camp to camp, just like the gentleman we're about to talk about in Kamaru Usman, moving from camp to camp and taking different skills from being in different places. But Valentina obviously likes to stay in one place, and that works for her. But moving on to Kamaru Usman, he looked absolutely fantastic yesterday. There was no doubt in anyone's mind within the first 30 seconds of that fight that he was not going to win, and it was not going to be in spectacular fashion. George, you're obviously very high on Kamaru, but it was just glorious yesterday, wasn't it?
And he's pound for pound king now. There's no questions anymore, and this he can finally chuck away this silly tag he's had for a little while called Snoozman. He's now finishing guys. He's now the ultimate scary machine. Him and Trevor Whitman. If he doesn't beat you by wrestling with you, he'll beat you by striking with you. And the question now becomes, how do you stop him and who stops him? And the answer to that is, I'm not sure anybody's going to do that. Obviously it sounds like Colby Covington's next. Whether we think that's right or not, I don't know. But, I don't see him beating him. Leon Edwards won't beat him, and all the rest of them won't beat him. So he will stand alone at the top of there for however long he wants to stand there for. And the scary thing is that he seems to be continuing to get better at the moment. And I think that has been a Trevor Whitman effect. Trevor Whitman's going to be coach of the year. There's no doubt about it. He's had 3 title fights and come out victorious every time. But
with
last night, and all finishes, as well, all finishes. He's clearly, whatever he's doing in Colorado is definitely working. So, but last night just looked quite routine, didn't it? I thought Masvidal would give him more issues, but it was just one, like you said, though, kind of like a minute and 30 seconds in, it's kind of like, oh, I see where this is going here. And then you kind of then remind yourself that Masvidal's never been finished in his career, and it's like, surely not. Surely that's not going to, that can't happen. Maybe he might take a few of Usman's shots, but he'll see his way through. But, that shot that ended it for him was a Hail Mary and a half, wasn't it? When your chin touches your shoulder, you're in banging trouble. When Masvidal, was pretty much, he was gone, wasn't he? The few extra shots afterwards, which were super necessary, but I just think, I just don't think he's going to get beaten. I think that's a simple fact now. You look at some guys, you think about the girls, Nunes and Shevchenko, and you think about people like Ngannou and Figueiredo at the moment. Ngannou is kind of the king of the guy who just won't be denied. He won't be stopped. He's too well-rounded. His mindset and his game plan is too good. His coaching team is too good. The weakness isn't there. You can't find the weakness. And I think that's the problem for people when they look at him. Sometimes I think of Kamaru Usman and I think of a guy who is, he's almost won before he even gets into the cage. He's almost beaten the guy before he gets there because people just don't know how to go about beating him. And maybe behind the scenes and quietly, Masvidal knew that. And other guys will find it out over the next few years. But I think he's 32 or 33 and there's still a few years left in him. And he's going to have all kinds of records. And he's heading rapidly towards a conversation for the modern day GOAT as well. If he keeps on winning emphatically and destroying people like he's been doing recently, he has to come into that conversation. And there's no doubt about it now. He's pound for pound king at the moment. No doubt about it.
If he stays busy as well. Obviously, we only saw him fight a couple of weeks ago, it seems. And now he was pretty much, he must have been straight back into a camp, right? Because it wasn't that long ago that we saw him win.
70 days ago he fought last, and we can be damn sure he'll fight again this year. He'll definitely fight before the end of the year. So, yeah, this has been another new thing for Usman, that he's fighting more regularly than he has done in the past. So, he's really upped his game. He is a truly brilliant all-round mixed martial artist now.
And it was what we all wanted to see. Obviously, with Masvidal never being knocked out, he had one TKO loss on his record, but, I had a look and it was a very, very long time ago. He hasn't actually been finished in the octagon since 2009 when he got submitted. But it was just an unbelievable performance. And like you said, it was super, super necessary for him to have them follow-up shots. There was a bit of a rhetoric on social media that it was a little bit late and Herb Dean didn't get over there quick enough. But, should the referee take into consideration the fact that this fighter has never been knocked out before and has been doing the knocking out over the past couple of fights and had those kind of extra shots? We saw it with Darren Till. He had 1, 2, 3, 4 shots after Darren Till was clearly very, very asleep. The same with Ben Askren. Prath, what do you think? Do you think Herb Dean just thought, what, I've seen you beast these guys for a little bit, and now look, I want to make sure you're fully asleep, because the ref will never do anything right. And we know that as fans. The ref will never have the complete support of the community. But do you think Herb Dean let him get them a few extra shots just to say, look, he's really asleep now. No one can say anything about the fact that I stopped it early or he was getting back up?
I think it was yourself that sent me the meme earlier with Herb Dean being like, oh, this fight should really be stopped. Oh, wait, I'm the referee. And that's kind of what I feel like whenever I watch a Herb Dean fight, is like he's kind of looking. Oh, I've got to do something. So, could he have pulled him off maybe a shot or two earlier? Maybe. But I will say, in this circumstance in particular, it didn't seem that Masvidal kind of went out until the last shot. So I don't know if that was like, that would maybe have taken away from Kamaru's win just a little bit, a TKO win instead of a KO win, which is what he deserved there because he got the knockout there. So rightfully given what's his kind of thing. So do I think he maybe got pulled off a little bit too early? I would probably say no. In this particular circumstance. In pretty much every other Herb Dean circumstance, pretty much, yeah. So yeah, it's a weird thing with him, and Mark Smith as well as a guy that we've discussed, who has a kind of like a black skull kind of hanging around his neck. Just everybody knows that you're about to enter some weird night when you've got Mark Smith as your referee, and then I'm sure people now feel that way when they see Herb Dean kind of coming into the dressing room being like, oh God, okay, this is gonna suck. So yeah, I think the last shot was the one that really put him away. So I don't think it was an early stoppage in any way.
Cool. Yeah, I know. I completely agree with you. And I think someone like Masvidal, who likes to talk the talk, me, if I was a referee in there, there's going to be a tiny little piece of you that's going to go, you know what? I want to see him really get put to sleep if he gets put into that position anyway, just so there's no kind of Dominic Cruz, oh, he smelled like beers and cigarettes kind of vibe when he stands up afterwards. You don't want that. You don't want that at all.
But you also
with Weili Zhang, that she didn't want to accept that she had lost. She felt like she had more in the fight.
Yeah. Well, you're a fan of gore, so of course that's what you want. The rest of us are level-headed human beings, and so we're like, okay, well, maybe that was a bit much, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Now, we shouldn't have really seen this fight anyway, because after the first performance that Masvidal had, it wasn't overly great. He obviously stepped in on 6 days' notice, I believe it was, and lost 20 pounds. He had a full camp this time, and he still did absolutely nothing. So, Prash, where does Masvidal go from here? Because he is 36. I know he looks a little bit younger. He's got that Latino blood, but he is obviously on the back end of his career as well. But it's almost like he's come to a resurgence in the back end of his career anyway. Where does he go from here? Because he shouldn't have been challenging for the title anyway. Where does he sit around the top of the division? Does he fight Nate Diaz again? Does he fight Nick Diaz and then sail off into the sunset?
So, I mean, a couple of things there. First of all, I think he was a sacrificial lamb, to be honest with you, because Kamaru has been the most underappreciated champion they've had in quite a few years. Partly because he's black champion and they never love black champions in the UFC, but also because, initially in the early parts of his career, he was dominant, but not really getting that finish. And I feel like, even though he was getting some really amazing finishes over the past few fights that he's had over, really credible challenges, this particular finish, even though Jorge, we could all argue, was far less qualified compared to the other contenders that he's had to face, is a way bigger star than all of them put together. So he needed this knockout to get that star power, that rub, as they say, and to level up. So in people's eyes worldwide, the brand of Kamaru Usman as champion could really be on that big stage. Because, you know, today it's like World Star Hip Hop are putting up clips of that thing. And, you know, people that I know that don't really watch MMA were messaging me this morning, oh my God, I saw this knockout. And that's the power of Masvidal being in there in that position as the placeholder next to Usman. He's done his job now, though, so he can go away from the title scene. And now I would say Rocky's going to melt Diaz. So the fight between those two is probably what we'll likely see next. Conor appeared out of nowhere today and started calling for Usman's head, which, you know, whatever. But I don't think he's necessarily really looking for Masvidal either. And I think that once we really all as a community get to enjoy Usman relocking Colby's jaw again and finishing him off next time, that fight there will also be ready for Masvidal, as long as he can go and beat Diaz, which, to be honest, I think is, again, he looked amazing against Diaz, and I think he'd probably beat him again. So I could see them two fighting, Masvidal getting a win from there, Colby fighting Usman losing, and then them two getting put together for that grudge match. After that, though, I think he'll say, thank you, sayonara. If he beats Colby, he'll retire. If he loses against Colby, he'll retire. Go and do a couple of celebrity boxing matches, like I said, and rise off to the sunset.
Yeah, it makes sense. And with Jake Paul, obviously he was training Jake Paul for a little bit, which kind of spurred on the whole, like, oh, look at me, I'm doing this and I'm doing these things with this community and these things with this community. So that was why Masvidal made a bit of money from that. Jake Paul being in the audience, he said as well. And I'm sure he probably slipped out the back door very quietly and didn't see his boy afterwards. But yeah, it's a very strange place for Masvidal on where he goes from here. But Usman can really pick where he wants to go and who he wants to fight next. Like you said, we've got Leon Rocky Edwards fighting soon as well. But who else is there? You know, he's going to have to, you know, do another lap and beat everyone again, unless he beats someone like Chiesa, who has just come into the division, you know, a few fights in. But even then, I don't see Chiesa being a problem for Usman and being that much of a star fight for him.
I think Wonder Boy's there, obviously, is the only real other outstanding name that most of the fans, you know, love, A, and B, give credit for as being a credible challenger who's faced other champions before, you know, namely Tyron Woodley. So I think beyond that fight, and obviously Rocky's there, there isn't really much for him. And I think that, you know, like with the other... If he gets another, no, I mean, they'll fight just like he did with Burns. I don't think there's any concern there. But I just don't. I mean, I don't see Luque really in this league, if I'm honest with you. I think Luque's going to need to go for one more win now against someone really up there. I don't know, like, you know, top 3, top 4. But how can he even get that matchup right now? Because everyone's matched up and heading towards the contendership side, whereas Luque's a little bit out of that still. So I don't think that Luque is really an immediate conversation. I don't think he's even going to be a conversation in 18 months' time right now, because because he's been really active, and I think that activity will give him some breathing space now until, where are we now? We're in April. So I reckon him and Colby will fight probably by the end of summer. So maybe July, August, September, something like that. Then I think he want to take a little time off and maybe come back in the new year after that. So you've got Edwards then after that in the new year. And then, you know, and then maybe after that, we see what's about. Is it a super fight? No, he doesn't really want to fight for the middleweight title against Izzy. I don't see Izzy really losing anytime soon, but, you know, MMA, who knows? If Izzy loses the title and he decides to move up and try and really make a proper run at light heavyweight, then maybe we'll see him go up against Vittori or whoever else. Maybe I could see maybe Rob Whittaker getting the title back, and then he goes for a super fight with Rob. So those are the only real possibilities I can see for him, because that, and, you know, I'm sorry, Uncle Dana's son, obviously, Conor, will lose against Dustin, then maybe he'll get fed that fight as well, because Conor's got the star power. And for us, we'll all love that because we love Usman, and that'll just be another way for him to make some more money and get even more famous.
Yeah, completely.
I've got one. What happens when he comes back in the summer? He has this unbelievable knockout and everyone's back on board the Chimaev hype train.
Oh, I forgot about that guy.
But even then,
everyone's like, "Oh, the guy's insane."
No, it's a really good point, George. It's a good shout. It's a good shout.
Thumbs up.
It could happen.
It could.
Uncle Dana's nephew, 100%.
And it's about as close as Usman will get to a Khabib-esque fight, right? That kind of mauling, over the top style. But I think Chimaev, like, to be honest, like, I think he's leaps and bounds above Khabib in terms of the striking side of things, in the striking department. Hold on to your hats, gentlemen.
Whoa.
I think he's an incredible grappler, but his hands are just like, I think a step above Khabib in that sense. So, yeah.
Because the bottom line is, they're talking about Neil Magny, aren't they? They're saying Neil Magny's next for Chimaev. That's what they're saying, aren't they?
No. Apparently, it's going to be Nick Diaz, mate.
Brilliant.
No.
Dana said it in the conversation. They asked him, "Oh, is Chimaev a possibility?" And Dana was like, "It's a possibility." So that's going to be horrific.
God bless you,
Another
Nick
one
Diaz.
of my heroes come back just to get retired. Oh, Lord.
But these kind of fighters, they've been out of the game for such a long time, and they would still be fighting the same style that they were fighting 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. But they're fighting someone that's been active, and they're fighting someone that has been consistently evolving throughout the past couple of years. So I don't see Nate, Chris Weidman, he's finished now anyway. I don't see these kind of people ever making a run back in modern day MMA, purely because they're not as up to date as they could be.
I like that.
Leave Chris alone, man.
Any reason to bring Chris back up?
It seems a bit pointless, though, doesn't it? Chimaev against Diaz seems a bit pointless in the whole grand scheme of things.
Totally pointless.
Yeah, completely.
So, the thing is, the Diaz mindset, their mindset is that we want to fight killers. So obviously, Diaz was he more or less called for Leon Edwards. He was saying, look, I want to fight people that have undefeated records. I don't want to just fight any bum sort of thing. And Edwards fit the bill for the kind of fighter they look for. And I just think, honestly, you were right about it. Chimaev is that kind of fighter that fits the bill of this destroyer that no one wants to fight. And that's right up the street of the Diaz's ambitions. But we all know how that fight's going to look, and it's going to be ugly for Diaz.
It's very ugly. It's going to be very, very ugly. It's going to be hideous for him.
I mean, that was the reason why he was in the audience yesterday, right? And there was a few faces in the audience that we saw, and it was kind of like, oh, it was almost like pro wrestling when you see someone in the audience and you think, oh, look, they're in the audience. Are they going to come back? Are they going to be fighting this person? What's going to happen? It kind of adds to the storylines that could be going on in people's heads, and the kind of different fan theories and the Reddit threads that we're going to be getting now of he was here because of this, and all these sub threads. And it's just an ongoing story, isn't it? But to wrap up the evening, it was an absolutely fantastic, glorious, exciting. It was everything that I wanted it to be. Prath, tell me.
I just wanted to highlight the early Fight Pass prelims again. I think I'll just brush over it really quickly, but man, there were some great fights to start the card. And again, I think the energy of the crowd really brought that craziness. Ariane Carnelozzi getting a win over Na Liang emptying the gas tank at the end of the first round and just was not able to do anything. And Ariane coming on and so strong. The second other fight was obviously the fight of the night, which was Kailen Ayori versus Jeff Molina. Jeff Molina just having incredible counters for everything that Kailen had for him. And Kailen just moving forward the entire time, like did not stop once. I think with a bit of technique brush up, he's going to be someone that's going to have that crazy pace that you see like Li Jingliang come in with and these other guys. Their main trainer is Dean Amasinger, who is a kind of a British a legend within the training side of mixed martial arts in the UK. So he is out in China now training those guys, and he has a lot of good things to say about these guys. So I'm really interested to see how this next batch of Chinese fighters really come through and are able to really implement their style of fighting. So just those guys I really wanted to highlight. Dana Batkhial, which was a name that I kept trying to go over yesterday, and that's the proper pronunciation. I think you guys will find. Mongolian fighter.
The Mongolian murderer.
Mongolian mad. Just one of the. I love highlighting these very, very small countries that have maybe one or two fighters. Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, and things like that. It's really awesome to see these guys come out of these small places. Well, not for the most part, none of these places are actually very small. But in the grand scheme of MMA, they come from smaller countries that compound with these. So amazing to see someone like that. I know he trains out of Jackson Wink now. So to go from Mongolia to Albuquerque, New Mexico must be a hell of a trip for this guy. And so I hope it's worth it. He got a KO within 50 seconds of the round. So it looks like something's working well for these guys. But amazing early prelims card. I think, as a fan base, we kind of slate the early prelims quite a lot because they aren't that exciting generally. They are either very, very boring or extremely exciting. And so when it's extremely exciting, I like to give them props. So massive shout out to the early prelim cards.
These ones were great, actually. They were really
Very
great,
good.
really exciting. UFC China PI 0-3, unfortunately. So back to the drawing board for them. It's a lot of money wasted on that investment there, but I can see some potential for sure. The shout out for me actually goes to Bruce Buffer. Man, he just nailed it yesterday. Like, honestly, I had goosebumps. He killed it. He was extra loud. He was extra spinny, extra shiny, and he just really made it happen. Like, sometimes I think with the commentary we can get a bit lost because they kind of get a little bit silly at times, and you're like, okay, like, I get it, they're freaked out, it's a crazy KO, and we want to see that once in a while, but it's a bit much at times. But back in the arena with the fans, and I just thought Bruce Buffer, man, he just knocked it out of the park on another level yesterday, and he just made that big fight. It felt like the prelims all the way through to the main card, every fight was a big fight. So shout out to him, man, because I thought he was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And my mistake for missing out the early prelims. The early prelims were fantastic. There was a little quiet bit in the middle where I managed to nap very, very briefly, and then
Casual.
And then the main card. You didn't even watch it live. I don't know what you're trying to.
Yeah, that's true. The less they know, the less they know.
We were up tweeting each other, actually. So
coming at me with the C word.
Where were you?
But no, it was a fantastic night of fights, and it was just thrills, fireworks from start to finish. And it's one of them cards. It's one of them numbered events that we like to see and go, wow, that is one of the, obviously recency bias being kind of in your mind as well. It was one of the best fight cards that we've seen for a very, very long time, with regards to just action and just mad stuff happening. But next week, we've obviously got Reyes versus Prochaska. Is it Prochaska?
Prochaska.
It's something along them lines anyway. And we're going to be breaking that down as well. And I believe he was having a few cans on the way to... on the way over to Vegas or wherever the fight's going to be. So that's going to be absolutely insane. So we'll be breaking that card down as well, and hopefully it will have as many fireworks as last night did. So if you've made it to the end of the episode, thank you so much for joining in. As always, we have some merch for sale as well, as Prath is sporting. Check out the Fighting Talk 2 Etsy. And thank you very much to the fantastic co-host of this show, as always. George over in Casual Corner, thank you very much for jumping back on and for being awake at 3 a.m, unlike Prath, to text and talk about the fights. It was fantastic. Prath, thank you very much as always for being the eloquent analyst 2.0. And Prash, thank you very much for jumping on Twitter yesterday as well, and bouncing some tweets about it. And it was great to have you on the show. And thank you very much for jumping on for the breakdown. If you do not follow us on social media, Fighting Talk 2 on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, I will put the link in the description below for the merch, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much.